Amenhotep IV, who later became known as Akhenaten, was an Egyptian pharaoh and the father of King Tut, also known as Tutankhamun. He was born into the 18th dynasty during the New Kingdom of Egypt. This era produced many tremendous and honestly infamous pharaohs, with Amenhotep IV's father being one of them. The industrious Amenhotep III and his chief royal wife, the most senior wife among the pharaoh's wives, Queen Tai, welcomed Amenhotep IV as their second son. Unfortunately, their eldest son and crowned prince, Thutmose, died sometime during the late years of Amenhotep III's reign. Though the pharaoh had many children, Amenhotep IV became crowned prince and eventually co-ruled with his father. The death of Amenhotep III in 1353 or 1351 before the Common Era marked Amenhotep IV's ascension to the throne. Akhenaten, originally named Amenhotep IV, was a pharaoh of Egypt's 18th dynasty who ruled from approximately 1353 to 1336 before the Common Era. His reign is considered one of the most transformative and honestly controversial periods in Egyptian history, marked by radical religious, artistic, architectural, and political changes. Early life and ascension. Akhenaten was born around 1370 before the Common Era to Pharaoh Amenhotep III and Queen Tai during Egypt's Golden Age. Egypt was then the wealthiest and most powerful kingdom in the ancient world, with Amun as its chief deity. Though details of his upbringing are, well, pretty scarce, Akhenaten likely received training in religious texts, literature, and military strategy, as was customary for royal princes. The priests in ancient Egypt were a powerful and important group, second only to the pharaoh. They played key roles in religion, politics, and society. Here's a simplified explanation of their duties, lifestyle, and influence. Priests were responsible for performing daily rituals in temples to maintain harmony between gods, earth, and the heavens. They acted as mediators between people and gods. High priests like the High Priest of Amun were influential political advisors to the pharaoh. The hierarchy of priests in ancient Egypt was, well, quite structured. At the top were the high priests. These were the leaders of the priesthood, often old and wise, overseeing temple activities and, advising the king. Then there were specialized priests. First, the lector priests, also known as cheraheb, who wrote religious texts and conducted ceremonies. Next, the hour priests, who acted as astronomers, studying time and astrology for temple rituals and agriculture. And interestingly, many priests actually served only part-time. They would fulfill their duties for a set period, then return to their regular lives once their term ended. Now, as for their lifestyle, priests had to follow some pretty strict rules to stay pure. They bathed several times daily, shaved all their body hair, including their eyebrows, and wore only linen clothes, never wool or leather. They also avoided certain foods like fish, in order to maintain their ritual purity. By the time of the New Kingdom, the priestly class had become extremely wealthy, controlling as much as 1/3 of Egypt's fertile land. Their wealth gave them significant political power, but, it also opened the door to corruption. Priests sometimes exploited people's fears of the afterlife, selling magical spells, amulets, and certificates that promised salvation, like the famous Book of the Dead. This practice was, in some ways, similar to the indulgences sold by clergy in medieval Europe. Over time, the priests' growing power actually weakened royal authority, and, honestly, that contributed to the decline of ancient Egypt's stability. Akhenaten is best known for his, radical religious reforms that introduced Atenism, a new form of worship centered on Aten, the sun disk. Aten was elevated from a minor solar deity to the supreme god, symbolized as a sun disk with rays ending in hands representing the light and life-giving energy of the sun. In the 5th year of his reign, Akhenaten officially changed his name to reflect his devotion to Aten, meaning effective for Aten, and began suppressing traditional gods like Amun. Nefertiti's name was also expanded to Neferneferuaten, which translates to, "Beautiful is the beauty of Aten Nefertiti." That same year, Akhenaten moved his capital to a new site about 200 miles north of Thebes. By year 9, Akhenaten declared Aten as Egypt's sole deity. Worship of other gods was banned, temples were closed, and their names were erased from monuments. Scholars debate whether Atenism was truly monotheistic, meaning worshipping only one god, or monolatristic, which is acknowledging other gods but choosing to worship only one. Interestingly, Akhenaten did not actually deny the existence of other gods, but instead, he centralized worship around Aten. A new hierarchy emerged where Akhenaten positioned himself as Aten's sole intermediary. Only he and Queen Nefertiti could directly worship Aten, while everyone else had to worship through them. The suppression of Amun, by the way, weakened the powerful priesthood that had dominated Egyptian politics for centuries. Akhenaten revolutionized Egyptian art to reflect his religious ideals. Early artworks followed traditional Theban styles, but soon they evolved into a unique aesthetic reflecting Atenism. Royal depictions became more naturalistic and honestly a bit exaggerated. The royal family was portrayed with elongated necks, large lips, squinting eyes, narrow shoulders, wide hips, and protruding bellies. These features were meant to symbolize their divine connection to Aten. So during Akhenaten's reign, temple iconography, really shifted away from the usual depictions of interactions with the gods. Instead, we start seeing scenes of Akhenaten's everyday life, which, emphasized his role as the living embodiment of Aten. Now, when it comes to architectural innovations, Akhenaten's building projects clearly reflected his devotion to Aten. In year 5 of his reign, he actually moved Egypt's capital from Thebes to a brand new city called Akhetaten, what we now know as Amarna, which by the way means horizon of Aten. The site for Akhetaten was chosen specifically for its isolation and, interestingly, for its symbolic resemblance to the hieroglyph for horizon. Temples there were built without roofs, so sunlight, the divine rays, could just flood right in. As for construction methods, Akhenaten's builders used smaller building blocks called talatat, making it possible to complete most administrative buildings and temples in just about 3 years. Now, the final years of Akhenaten's reign, they remain shrouded in mystery. It's believed he died in year 17, around 1336 BCE, but the exact cause of his death is still unknown. And, as it turns out, his intended tomb at Amarna didn't actually contain a burial. Some scholars, suggest that a skeleton found in tomb KV55 in the Valley of the Kings might actually belong to Akhenaten, since there were grave goods linked to the Amarna period. After his death, Egypt quickly reverted to its traditional polytheistic beliefs under his successors, possibly Smenkhkare or Tutankhamun. There were, in fact, serious efforts to erase Akhenaten's legacy. Temples dedicated to Aten were dismantled, and any references to him were removed from official records. Akhenaten's life and achievements honestly mark a real turning point in ancient Egyptian history. As pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, he's most famous for introducing Atenism, a revolutionary religious reform that elevated the Aten, the sun disk, as the sole god, completely replacing Egypt's traditional polytheism. Akhenaten's bold move included building a new capital, Akhetaten, which is modern-day Amarna, and promoting a unique artistic style that broke with centuries of tradition. His reign centralized religious and political power around himself and his family, which weakened the authority of the powerful priesthood of Amun. But despite all these innovations, his reforms were deeply controversial and, ultimately, reversed after his death as Egypt returned to its old beliefs. Akhenaten's legacy, though, endures as a symbol of radical change, religious experimentation, and the complex relationship between power and faith in ancient Egypt.